Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of In Conversation by Advisor Coach. Today in conversation, our guest is Mr. A. Anandha Padmanabhan, Fund Manager Equity with PGIM India Mutual Fund. Welcome, Ananda, to In Conversation with Advisor Coach today.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
So, Ananda, just to begin, if you could just take our viewers about your background, about the investment management journey, and how your experience has
Sure.
been.
Sure. So my investment management journey started with Canara Robeco. I joined Canara Robeco in 2009. I started in Canara Robeco as an equity research analyst. The first sector that I started handling was pharmaceuticals and healthcare. I was with Canara Robeco for over 8 years, and during this period, apart from pharmaceuticals and healthcare, I had also looked at multiple other sectors as an equity research analyst. This includes sectors like real estate, information technology, uh, uh, select new age financials. Uh, and Post that, for a brief period, I was with a firm called Renaissance Investment Managers, which
Mhm.
used to have their PMSs and AIF. There again, I was working there as an equity research analyst. I joined PGIM in 2019. I joined PGIM as an equity research analyst. Here I was covering pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and specialty chemicals. These are the sectors that I continue to look. In 2022, I was elevated to a assistant fund manager in the Flexi Cap Fund with Aniruddha Naha. And from first, and I've been looking at this fund since then, Flexi Cap Fund since then. As of today, I manage the Flexi Cap Fund and the Large Cap Fund and the Equity Savings Fund.
Okay, so you're the designated fund manager for the Flexi and the Large Cap for PGIM India Mutual Fund.
Correct, correct.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Ananda, PGIM India Mutual Fund is launching the NFO of PGIM India Healthcare Fund on 19th of November this month and
Correct,
closing on 3rd of December. So could you take
correct.
our viewers in terms of why a healthcare and a pharmaceutical fund now? What do you believe of this sector? What do you believe are the gaps in this sector, and what do you believe, are the, uh, you know, the momentum going forward in this sector as well?
Sure. So, if we look at this sector as a whole, or if I let us take a step back. So there are two things in life for which we typically don't negotiate prices. One is education, and another is healthcare. You never go to a doctor and ask negotiate him for the price. You just you don't have any say on the price that you pay for healthcare. And even if we look at the macro data, if we look at the healthcare inflation data or the medical inflation data in developed countries like US, you would find that healthcare inflation tends to be very sticky in nature. And the case would be the same even in countries in like India. And this is one business where, as a company which is into this sector, the company this inherently means that companies in this sector have very superior pricing power. That is something that makes this sector attractive from an investment perspective. The other thing that we find very interesting about this sector is that while we say that healthcare as one sector, it is not a homogeneous sector. There are various sub-segments in this sector, and each of this sector have a different set of drivers. Let me classify saying that, okay, healthcare, and we include the manufacturing part as well as the services part.
Mm.
The manufacturing part includes pharma. So pharma, again, that can be domestic as well as export. Export from Indian context typically means US generics. That is what bulk of the companies in India who is exporting. They typically cater to the US generics market. Similarly, you can have classification in terms of formulations versus API. You also have contract manufacturing as an opportunity in this segment. If you move to the services side, you have hospitals, you have diagnostics, you have custom research services. And apart from that, there are various allied subsegments or allied segments which cater or help in these sectors. For example, pharmacy retail. That is again a function of how the domestic formulation piece, it supports a domestic formulation piece. Pharmacy retail or pharmacy wholesale, that would be one piece. Similarly, if you look at if you look at something like a health insurance, which again is based on it's a supporting function on the overall healthcare sector. So if you look at this sector, there are a wide array of subsegments in this sector, and each of these segments, each of the subsegments have their own set of drivers. So unlike many other sectors, like say for example something like an IT services, wherein you will find that it's a more of a top-down driven sector. For example, in case there is a huge recession in US in the future, that will obviously have an adverse impact on the entire IT services space. Whereas
Definitely.
whereas in pharma, there is no one thing or one event that can impact the entire space, all the subsegments in a single go. Each subsegments have their own set of drivers. So what it means is that at any given point of time, irrespective of whatever is the market situation or whatever are the developments at any point in time, you will definitely find investment opportunities in these in mix of the subsegments. So this makes this segment a more of a secular kind of a story. While this is a thematic fund, but typically we see that in a thematic fund, these themes tend to be, there would be a cycles in which this theme works, and after in some cycles the themes don't work. Healthcare is an exception to that, wherein there would be across all time periods, you will find that within this space, you will continue to find investment opportunities, and that what makes it more, that was make this very attractive sector to look at. We at PGIM, we have always mentioned that our focus would be to manage the investor experience. So we want to come up with products wherein we can across time periods, across if an investor typically is expected to remain invested in a fund from anywhere between at least from 3 to 5 years is the investment journey that a typical investor needs to have in a fund. So we'll come up with products where over a time period, the investor has a relatively uniform journey in terms of the investment experience. So from that perspective, we have always mentioned that we would want to come up with all seasons kind of investment products. And to that perspective, even though healthcare is a thematic fund, it fits into that theme. And that is the reason why we are launching this fund.
Sure. So the style of the management will continue to be the growth style, which you follow.
That goes without saying. So that is core to our investment philosophy. We
Sure.
at heart we are or our core investment philosophy is GAR, growth at reasonable price. We focus on companies with consistently higher growth and higher ROE, and those are the kind of companies that we want to invest in. And this will be the same for even this fund, wherein the companies that we select or the investment universe that we select from which the portfolio construction will be made for this fund. This will be the process of making the investment universe will be through the core investment philosophy.
Sure. Sure. Specifically, if you talk about India, how do you believe the demand gap getting shaped up here for health and the pharmaceutical sector particularly?
So India as a space, so it's healthcare is if I have to start, if I just talk about the domestic opportunity in healthcare in India. The India currently, if you look at the per capita spending in healthcare or the healthcare expenditure per capita, India would be amongst the lowest. I'm not comparing with India with regulated or developed markets. Even you look with emerging markets or similar size economies, our per capita spending in healthcare is very low. But having said that, while it is low, one thing is that India is one of the fastest growing economies. Our GDP per capita is also increasing at a fast pace. So as and when you see this continued, the overall financial situation or the household income improves, you will find that their awareness about health and their ability and willingness to spend on healthcare will also go up. So we would find that while currently the spending on healthcare in India is relatively much lower than what it is needed, we find that this gap will be covered at a relatively faster pace that would result in higher spending on the healthcare. And also, one has to keep in mind that we are a young population. We are relatively, or average age of population is relatively young today. But as and when the household income improves, people become richer, and over a period of time, when people also age, there will be higher incidence of lifestyle diseases, diseases like, say, diabetes or cardiovascular ailments. You will find higher incidence of that, and that again, from a healthcare perspective, there is an opportunity that the healthcare as a sector can address. So that is on the domestic piece. And When I talk about domestic healthcare, it is not about domestic pharma per se. So
Mm.
typically, the general, because most of the companies or the larger companies in this space appear to be drug manufacturers or pharmaceutical companies, there is a general perception that healthcare as a sector means pharmaceuticals, but that is not
That's
the
right.
case. That is not the case. So
It's
when I
much
say
more
health,
broader.
it's
Yeah.
much more broader. So healthcare encompasses the entire ecosystem. It includes the formulation companies, obviously. It includes the API companies which supply APIs to to these formulation companies. It includes hospitals which
Mm.
treat those ailments. It includes diagnostic laboratories which actually help in detection of these ailments. And it also includes the entire ecosystem consisting of domestic wholesale and retail pharmacy chains, which actually help in ensuring that the medication is available to each and everyone, ensure that the reach is there. So this is a relatively very large, even the domestic store itself is a relatively large ecosystem where there are varied kind of opportunities. Again, in terms of if I have to talk about the export opportunity in healthcare, that again is a very interesting opportunity.
Yeah,
Today,
because like I was just about to ask that question, that with
correct,
this, the US elections getting over and what we're hearing about the tariffs, etc.
correct,
So what do you, yeah, you can of course continue answering.
correct, correct.
What do you believe in the
Sure.
export specifically to US, and how much are we in terms of rounded exports across the other part minus US as well on the pharma is concerned particularly?
Sure, sure. So let me just give you some numbers. So if you look as at end of FY23, based on the publicly available data, India was the third largest by volume in terms of pharmaceutical exports. So if
That's
you
right.
look at the volume of drugs that has been exported, India is the third largest globally. So in terms of ensuring there is a availability of drug to everybody, India plays a key role. It is more of a manufacturing or a supplier of pharmacy to the world. That's what people say. India is a pharmacy to the world. And bulk of our export consists generic drug. So large part of the Indian export is basically generic drugs. If I say generic drugs, typically generic drugs are drugs which are not covered by any patent. So the benefit of generic drugs is that they are cheaper and they are more affordable.
Mm.
So we are largest by volume, and the drugs that we supply are more affordable drugs, or it improves the affordability of healthcare, or actually any nation which wants to bring down the cost of healthcare. Obviously, one country that they will look up to bringing down the cost of healthcare would be India, because we have the capability of supplying huge amount of generic drugs at a very reasonable price. That is the
Mm.
inherent capability that a country like India has. In terms of composition, obviously today, if you look at the overall healthcare exports into India, US forms a major chunk. Almost half of our exports globally in terms of the value of export, more than 50% of that export will be going to US.
That's
Obviously,
right.
US is one of the most expensive places in terms of healthcare. So in terms of realization, exports to US fetch a higher realization. So that's the reason why bulk of, in terms of value, US contributes more than 50% of our overall pharmaceutical exports. The second region that would contribute the highest would be Europe. So US with Europe will be anywhere between 70 to 75% of our overall pharmaceutical exports by value.
Mm.
Especially coming to in terms of what will happen because of change in the political leadership in US currently. US, so it's as of now, if I look at the current scheme of things, at least if I look at the recent news flows that have come till now in the run up to the elections and even post elections, the news flows that have come from US, as of now, it doesn't appear that there would be any major disruption. That is something that
Okay.
obviously one needs to closely watch out for. But what I would say is that from US perspective, in terms of if you look at the US market, obviously the cost of healthcare is highest in the US. But the cost of healthcare, if you look at the generic drug or drug industry in the market, that is one portion of the overall market segment which is actually improving the affordability.
I see.
So any government which would want to improve or bring down the cost of healthcare, one of the easiest thing that they can do to bring down the cost of healthcare is encouraging faster genericization of drugs. So if that is any steps taken in that direction, will only be positive for the Indian pharmaceutical export industry. But having said that, this is something that one obviously needs to watch out closely in terms of what US wants to do. If I look at the previous tenure of the upcoming government in terms of announcement that they had made, it was during the COVID period when there was a lot of disruption in terms of supplies. At that point in time, one thing that they spoke about was to encouraging local
Mm.
manufacturing of drugs in US. While achieving it in a large scale in the current scheme of things is very difficult because cost of manufacturing drugs in US would be counterintuitive to bringing down the cost of healthcare. So they have to manage the accessibility and affordability.
Sure.
So as of now, it's more of a wait and watch. We don't think any major disruptions are in offering because of the change in political leadership in US. But obviously, that is something that one needs to watch out for and
Absolutely. I
see
completely
how
agree
things.
because how the things pan out in the next couple of months, one has to really watch them very carefully and analyze them
Correct,
as to what kind of
correct,
import tariffs are going to be because over 50% of exports of pharma as a sector to the US market is a very heavy dependence.
correct,
But so yeah, so hopefully we should not see any distortion or disruption of the data there. So
correct, correct.
so Ananda, why should any distributor or investor invest in PGIM India Healthcare Fund and FO?
Sure. So this is something that we have been constantly highlighting that healthcare, when we talk about healthcare, healthcare is not pharma, it's a very diverse set of
Mm.
opportunities. And if you look at how the profit pools are moving in this sector, how different segments the profit pools are going, while currently in terms of the market capitalization, bulk of the market capitalization is on the drug manufacturing side, where obviously it's a very interesting area. But if you look at, there are areas other than the drug manufacturing which are equally exciting. And in some cases, the profit pools are going at a much faster pace. And we being a very growth focused fund house, we have proven in terms of our ability and capability to identify stocks, such opportunities, wherein one can identify, we have a track record of identifying such stocks where we can see a very strong earnings growth profile over a longer period of time. And being a growth focused fund house, this is something that will be very core to wealth creation in this for this particular fund. And that would be the key differentiation, our investment process, investment strategy, and our approach would be the key differentiation that we will bring into this overall fund.
And of course, the outlook of the sector, which is a younger population, and lifestyle diseases to come up. This is a great sector to participate now and grow along with it.
So that obviously goes without saying, because as I said, that this is one of the more secular stories. If you look at various segments, pharmaceutical obviously becomes it's a more secular story, wherein if you look, especially if you look on the domestic opportunity in pharma, that's a multi-year kind of a story, and you
Mhm.
obviously will get a lot of good investment opportunities because the underlying pie itself is growing at a much faster pace. So and companies which are operating in this space, they are gaining scale, they are gaining their increasing market share. So if you're able to identify good companies which have the benefit of underlying opportunity going at a fast pace, plus them also being able to increase their market share. So this is a sector where you will find it very relatively easier to identify companies which can compound their earnings at a much faster pace.
Sure, sure. So through this in conversation by Advisor Push today, what message, Ananda, would you like to give to our mutual fund distributors, advisors, investors, about typical market corrections which you're going through, and of course about your PGIM India Healthcare Fund?
Sure. In terms of market, so we are entering into a phase of volatility. In the recent past, there was a scenario where one was seeing growth being broad based across the market, companies across the board seeing growth being broad based, as a result of which there were many sub-segments or areas within the markets where the narratives were running the valuations rather than the earnings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the volatility in the recent quarters have bought that differentiation has bought out that differentiation, wherein stocks where the earnings are not supporting the narratives, those kind of stocks have seen a good amount of correction. And incrementally, as we go forward, you will find that within each sector, not just pharma, but across all sectors, you will find that there would be a good amount of variation between companies that do well and companies that don't do well. And from that perspective, stock selection will become even more important in this
Absolutely.
current environment. And this is something that has been one of the differentiating factors of PGIM, our ability to identify. We have always been known as a stock picker or a good stock picker.
I think this
And
is
this is
right time,
something.
and most of the people are realizing that.
Correct. Correct. So this would be the time when the stock picking capabilities will be the key differentiating factor, and that is very well placed. And even in terms of our core strategy of being focused on growth and ROE, or being more earnings focused when it comes to the stock selection, that is something that is will get more rewarded in such kind of markets. So from that perspective, we feel that in terms of the style shift that people talk about, the style is shifting to our style of investing. That is the first part. Specifically with regard to healthcare fund, obviously this is a very attractive investment opportunity. While even from a near-term perspective, given the volatility, given that pharma, if you look historically, if you look at the long-term performance of the broader pharma index, the performance has been more or less in line with the broader market, but this performance has come with a much lower correlation with the broader market. It
Mhm.
is a typically defensive sector, and such sectors would obviously find favor in during these periods of high market volatility. And pharma, again, this is a sector which is a very bottom-up kind of a sector.
Mhm.
So this is
Mhm.
again where one needs to be focused on which is a subsegment of the sector that you are focused on, which are the stocks within those subsectors that you are choosing, and that would be the key differentiation factor in terms of ability to for a fund in this particular space to outperform. And we are of the view that we have got all the ingredients that are necessary to have to build a good portfolio and give and create wealth over a longer period of time.
Sure, sure, sure. So, well, for our viewers, this is Mr. A. Anandha Padmanabhan, fund manager equity with PGIM India Mutual Fund, talking about the new fund offer being launched on 19th November and closing on 3rd December, PGIM India Healthcare Fund. Thank you very much, Ananda, for taking us through, the healthcare as well as the pharma sector, the demands and the gaps and the opportunities coming up from there, and why a healthcare fund should have a meaningful long-term allocation from a thematic perspective in a client's portfolio for a long-term wealth creation. Thank you very much, Ananda, and wish you the very, very best for the
Thank
year.
you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.